Craft matters, in small ways, like how a coffee is brewed, and in not so small ways, like how your money is cared for, which is why for 160 years, UBS has elevated banking to a craft, tailoring unique strategies that combine human expertise with the latest technologies, all happening across 24 time zones and 12 key financial hubs, with you at the heart of it all. UBS. Advice is our craft.
You're listening to The Globalist, first broadcast on the 28th of January 2026 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist, in association with UBS. Hello, this is The Globalist, broadcasting to you live from Midori House in London. I'm Georgina Godwin. On the show ahead, the Rafah crossing between Israel and Egypt is set to reopen, but sharp disagreements remain over control and access. We'll break down the fault lines. Then,
this is the tale of two giants, the world's second and fourth largest economies, two giants who choose partnership in a true win-win fashion.
Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, in Delhi as the EU and India sign what she called the mother of all trade deals. We'll examine the details. We'll join our Zurich studio for a rustle through the day's front pages, and then Monocle's Carlotta Rebello looks ahead to the Portuguese election, set to be one of the most consequential in the country's democratic history.
The Portuguese are tired, feeling the brunt of an escalating housing crisis and a healthcare system that is bursting at the seams.
And fear of bursting dams is exacerbating the catastrophic floods in southern Africa, particularly in Mozambique, where more than 650,000 people have been displaced by rising waters. We'll cross to Cape Town for more. We'll have a roundup of news from Norway and hear how Korean boy band BTS is at the heart of a cultural diplomatic moment. And finally, the editor of Confect, Sophie Grove, has just returned from Paris Haute Couture Week. She'll share what brought the front row to its elegantly shod feet. That's all ahead here on The Globalist, live from London. First, a look at what else is happening in the news. The World Bank has approved $200 million in new funding to help Lebanon support its poorest citizens as the country struggles to recover from an historic economic collapse. France's government has survived 2 no-confidence votes after pushing through part of its 2026 budget without a full parliamentary vote. And the wife of South Korea's disgraced former president, Yoon Suk-yeol, goes on trial today on charges including bribery and political interference. Do stay tuned to Monocle Radio throughout the day for more on those stories. Now, plans to reopen the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt are moving closer after the body of the last Israeli hostage was returned. The reopening was agreed under the October ceasefire, but delayed after Israel seized control of Rafah last May. Israel now says the crossing will reopen partially in the coming days for pedestrians only, under full Israeli inspection. Egypt insists access must be two-way, while aid agencies say tens of thousands of people in Gaza need urgent medical treatment outside the enclave. Well, I'm joined by Yossi Meckelberg, Senior Consulting Fellow at the MENA Programme at Chatham House, Middle East and Africa, North Africa, and I'm delighted to welcome a new contributor to Monocle. She is Zizette Darkazali, a Chatham House Associate Fellow and a former United Nations advisor. Thank you both for coming in this morning. Yossi, can you clarify what Israel has actually agreed to and how restricted it will be?
Good morning. It will be very difficult to clarify because Israel doesn't want to clarify exactly what it wants to do. Because, as always, in Israel, it's more than foreign policy, it's domestic politics. So on the one hand, Netanyahu, under pressure from the United States and from some of the guarantors of this agreement in the region to open and to let more people go through the Rafah crossing, then domestically, he doesn't want to admit it because he promised an absolute victory over Hamas 2 years ago. This didn't happen. But, at least one chapter is closed, which is very problematic in Israel, when the last hostage returned home, and today it's his Ran Gvili's funeral. So it gives him some room to maneuver in this sense. But the question, now we're talking about around 150 people allowed to live. When we look at kind of the real need here, there are more than 80,000 that needs medical help, among them 4,500 children. So at what point they actually allow freer movement through Rafah is still unknown.
Yeah. I mean, Zizette, there are claims, obviously, that Israel wants more people exiting Gaza than re-entering. And I wonder if, under international law, can an occupying power control population movement in this way? And is that what they're trying to do?
Of course, the short answer to your question is no. Under international law, they're not allowed to do that. Gaza is an occupied territory. Israel is an occupying power, and they should not be closing Rafah. Rafah is the only lifeline the Palestinians have out of Gaza. Yossi mentioned about the patients that are waiting to go outside, and many of them on the list, by the way, have died. That are waiting to have died because of the lack of resources in Gaza. So no, under international law, Israel is not allowed to keep Rafah closed. But also Rafah is the management of Rafah is also under an agreement, the Access Movement Agreement that was signed in 2005 between the Palestinian Authority and Israel and the Egyptians and the Europeans, and under the supervision of the United States. And according to this agreement, Rafah needs to be managed by the Palestinian side and by the Egyptians, and the movement of personnel should be in and out, not only out of Gaza Strip.
And Yossi, I wonder how this fits with Jared Kushner's master plan for Gaza. He unveiled that, of course, at Davos.
Yeah, I mean, those are PowerPoint presentations. There is no plan that is going to be implemented anytime soon, especially under these conditions that half of Gaza is still occupied by Israel. So talking about the new Rafah, there will be some parts of Rafah that is not under control of Hamas. But while the needs are urgent, the only urgency they have is presenting all sorts of plans, which you don't even understand how Palestinians are going to fit into all of this, or it is something to serve the Trump administration or real estate people. So there is not. It will take probably around 3 years just to clear the ordinance, the rubble from Gaza. And we don't. It starts very slowly. Which at the same time, what are the governing structure are there? Who is in charge of security? How do you actually operate in an area which is not secure for the people that are going to work there? So, I mean, it's a plan. Unfortunately, not many Palestinians are actually involved in deciding their own future. So unless they're actually the new technocrat government is getting involved, it has administration, as people work for it, it will probably remain on paper or on screen.
And Zizette, would you then say that this is in fact managed population transfer?
I would say that, yes. I mean, look, Rafah is, as I said before, is the only landline. There is no other way of Palestinians to get out. Now, the question is, will they be allowed to return? Israel has made it clear that they are interested more of people coming out of Gaza, not without returning. So we'll wait and see. Just to comment back on what on the Kushner plan, look, we're going to have to see today as well tomorrow when Rafah opens, if the National Committee, the Palestinian National Committee, which is part of the plan as well, of the Trump plan, is allowed to go inside the Gaza Strip. If they're prevented of going, that's the first failed test of the Trump plan for the second phase.
Yeah. Yossi, is Rafah being used as leverage in talks with Hamas? And what has Trump said about Hamas very recently?
So he just kind of thanks Hamas for helping with finding the body of Ran Gvili, which again, Trump doesn't just say things like this, especially when he put it in capital letters. So it means he tried to put pressure on Hamas. You might not like them, but it has to be part of what's happening in Gaza. Of course, it's all confusing because also Trump changes his mind every day. For Netanyahu, anything dealing with Hamas is an embarrassment and unhelpful in an election year. So how they try to square all these circles in an election year when there is a need to, Hamas is not only what people look at it as a terrorist organization or militant organization, but this is an organization. This was a government that provides health service, education, building infrastructure. So if there is a need for all of their, and there is a need for all of this, who is going to replace Hamas? So all of this needs to be addressed. And I think the Trump administration start to understand. It's a bit reminds me of what they did in Iraq with the Baathification. So they try, you can't fire everyone that had anything to do with Hamas. You need to look which are the ones that you need, the decommissioning, and at the same time, those who you actually need to run the day-to-day life in Gaza.
Yeah. And finally, Suzette, for Palestinians, could the opening of the crossing be a lifeline, or is it just another form of control?
It is a lifeline. All these people that are injured, that are waiting for medical support, for medical treatment. Gaza has no hospitals. Gaza has no medical supplies. Gaza has no medicines as well. So they do need to go out to be treated. So yes, for Israel, of course, it's a method of control. Israel tries to, by closing it, making the life of the Palestinians much harder, but also it uses it as an instrument of control to control Palestinians' lives and also to try and extract more benefits and make it as a precondition to different things that Israel would like to achieve. But just to say one final thing is that we are all talking about the initiation of the second phase of the ceasefire. Maybe this is true that the first phase of the ceasefire ended for the Israelis. For the Palestinians, the first phase has not ended. There is no fire that has been seized inside Gaza. They're still shooting. There are still military operations. There are still strikes. So for the Palestinians, the opening of Rafah would be perhaps the only thing that might have come out as a good thing after the announcement of the ceasefire.
Suzette, thank you. That's Suzette Tarkazali, Chatham House Associate Fellow and former UN Advisor, and Yossi Meckelberg, Senior Consulting Fellow at the MENO Programme at Chatham House. And this is The Globalist. After nearly 20 years of stop-start talks, the European Union and India have agreed a free trade deal, being billed as the biggest either side has ever signed. It slashes tariffs across major sectors and comes as both countries look to hedge against an increasingly unpredictable United States. The agreement still needs ratification, but politically it already signals a new trade axis. I'm joined now by Maya Sharma, a journalist based in Bangalore, and Rebecca Christie, Senior Fellow at Bruegel, host of the Sound of Economics podcast. She joins us from Brussels. Welcome to you both. Maya, what's changed in the last 6 months that finally broke the decades-long deadlock?
Well, I think really India has realized that the United States in particular is not a partner to be relied upon. And Europe came across as just somewhat more predictable. And Europe, of course, is a huge market for Indian goods to have access to. It was in India's interest to really become closer to those 27 countries. And they're very excited about this deal. So while, of course, there is a need being seen across the world, given the new order under Trump, there is a feeling that there need to be new trade negotiations set up, new relationships forged, and existing relationships that become stronger, even if not necessarily with the United States. So I think India has also been very much part of what's been happening globally, needing to look at other trading partners to strengthen existing ties, knowing that with 50% tariffs in the United States, that is not always the go-to market anymore, and that they need to look elsewhere, which I think gave a sense of urgency towards this agreement, to something which was felt by the EU as well.
Rebecca, Brussels says that this could double EU exports to India. Is that accurate?
We'll see what happens when the deal is finally put in place. As we saw with the EU-Canada trade deal, which has been a success, it took almost 2 years between when they first signed the deal to when it passed all the legal hurdles and they put it into effect. So we still have some paperwork to go. That said, it's pretty exciting. The EU would like to strengthen the multilateral rules order, and making a trade deal is in line with that. It's giving the EU closer trade ties to the world's most populous country, the world with the fastest growing large economy in the world. There are just a lot of sectors like pharmaceuticals, even diamonds, where producers are really excited to start working together more closely.
And Maya, which Indian industries are most exposed to European competition? Because there could be downsides here.
Well, the agricultural sector in India is still being protected. It's not yet opened up to the markets. Cars was a problem. The import of cars, the Indian automobile industry was a little worried about that. And there were tariffs which were up to 110% on cars. Now that will come down to 10% over the years. These are luxury cars also, which will be coming in from Europe. So that is going to be a big difference. India does have a wine industry, but I think the European wines will be big competition for that as the tariff goes down from 150% to something as low as 20 to 30%. European chocolates will be coming in as well. But essentially, engineering goods are also a very big part of the imports from the European Union. So that is going to make a big difference. But India is insisting that it will be saving its dairy and its agricultural industry from foreign competition. It will not be that much. It will not be there so much.
I have to say, having tried Indian wine, I don't think there's any threat there. Rebecca, who other than car makers wins in Europe?
Pretty much any European producer of intermediate goods, high-end goods, is going to be excited about having a better place to export. So again, we've talked about pharmaceuticals as a place where there can be a lot of cooperation. Already there are industries where the raw materials or the earlier stage goods come from India to Europe. Now they may go back to Indian consumers in a way that just strips out some of the bureaucracy and makes it easier for things to get where they need to go.
And Maya, I mean, we know, we've talked about that this deal is in part about insulating India from US trade pressure. Will it work? Is it enough?
It's certainly going to be a very, very big market gain. The access of what Prime Minister Modi said was of small industries, farmers to the European market is going to make a very big difference. And also high employment industries like textiles, like leather, like gems and jewelry, which were really very badly hit by the United States tariffs. We've seen stories in Indian media of thousands of people losing their livelihoods. This is going to be greatly increased. Now, those industries are in focus, leather, gems and jewelry. They will be exporting now more to the European Union with the lower tariffs. So that's going to make a big difference when it comes to employment as well and to jobs guarantees. And Prime Minister Modi certainly very exciting and tweeting out in all the European languages yesterday, posting on X in every single European language his excitement over this mother of all deals, as it was described.
Rebecca, do you think this is Europe's strongest economic signal yet, that it's definitely pivoting towards Asia?
It's certainly a great sign that the EU is not retreating inside its borders and is in fact looking to strengthen its ties with the world, and that the US may end up being the odd one out.
I mean, I wonder how Trump has reacted. Has there been anything yet? I mean, is he likely to have a tantrum over this?
The U.S. is very domestically focused right now. What is happening in Minnesota is extremely serious and has repercussions across the country. You may have seen there was a border guard in a confrontation killing someone on the southern border as well. My sense is that Trump is very America first in his thoughts and ideas and plans, and what other countries are doing that in a way that doesn't involve him is something that may not register. Whether that's good or bad is another question, but that seems to be the world we're living in now.
And Maya, what do you think? Has India been worried about a possible Trump fallout over this deal?
I think right now they're very, very disappointed with what is happening in Indo-US relationships. I mean, both Prime Minister Modi and his government would always portray a certain closeness, a personal rapport between the two leaders. And they've been very disturbed by what has happened recently when it comes to the tariffs, when it comes to his statements on having brought peace to India and Pakistan, and many statements which have not gone challenged directly by the Indian government, but which certainly made them unhappy. They have been a bit low-key right now on Indo-US relationship. That trade deal is still a work in progress. They may be concerned, but I think they're also feeling right now that they have to look elsewhere, that they cannot be dependent on American goodwill and American trade.
Just very interestingly, I was at the Indian National Day celebrations in London, and one of the areas that they were really talking about was education, given that many Indians no longer feel welcome in the United States. What you're seeing now is British universities opening up satellite arms in India. You're seeing a lot more focus on young Indians wanting to stay within the country. This all seems to me like a deliberate move just to stay away from the US.
Well, yes, as you were saying, there are lots of British universities which are opening up campuses right here in India, across the country as well. And also, even with the EU, there's going to be easier movement of Indian professionals to Europe as well, with their dependents, with their families, and encouraging student visas to Europe, and also after study work visas. So it's as if the American dream there's an attempt to replace the American dream with the European dream. Now, that, of course, will take a long time coming. But there is definitely a move towards a greater ease of professionals as well between the two entities.
Maya Sharma in Bangalore and Rebecca Christie in Brussels. Thank you both very much. Still to come on the programme.
I'm Lars Bavanger, Monocle's Oslo correspondent, and I'll be talking about why a Norwegian film is being showered with Oscar and BAFTA nominations, and what's a Norwegian princess up to on the border with Russia.
This is The Globalist.
Craft is a matter of perspective, a unique outlook, an obsessive attention to detail. With UBS's Chief Investment Office House View, we're focused on identifying the latest investment opportunities and market risks to help you achieve your financial goals, so you get the big picture broken down into thought-provoking insights. Delivered daily and curated by over 200 globally connected, locally active analysts. UBS. Banking is our craft.
This is The Globalist on Monocle Radio. It's 7:21 here in London. We're broadcasting to you live from Midori House, but we're crossing now to our Zurich headquarters, where Laura Kramer, Monocle's senior producer, is standing by. Good morning to you, Laura.
Good morning, Georgina. So nice to hear you back.
And we are looking at the newspapers. Now, Laura, we look at global papers during this slot, but I'm not sure that anybody else would actually have chosen the Iowa Capital Dispatch as their top story. It may be a local paper for a local girl. You are from Iowa, but it is, in fact, a very global story.
Yes, I had to shout out my home state because that's where Donald Trump has kicked off his midterm campaign. The president was indeed in Iowa delivering a rare, I think, tightly scripted speech focused almost entirely on the economy. So I think it's a sign of growing concern inside the White House about voter frustration. Now, Trump presented his first year back in office as kind of a finished turnaround rather than a work in progress, claiming inflation has been beaten, wages are raising, and the investment is surging. But it's I think at the same time, the people I'm speaking to in Iowa are saying we're not feeling that. We don't see that inflation is going down. Our money is not going as far as it should be. So I think it's interesting that he's going with this message while warning at the same time that a Democratic victory in November's midterm would undo these supposed gains and that it might even lead to him being impeached again.
What about the Republican elephant in the room? Did he talk about immigration?
Well, this is what was interesting. Notably, immigration, usually central to Trump's rallies and something that was a huge focus of his presidential campaign, was pushed into the background. And of course, it comes as the administration is facing a lot of mounting criticism over enforcement of its tactics, including over the killing of 2 American citizens by federal agents in Minneapolis. Of course, Iowa borders Minnesota, so by this, it's no surprise that Trump was welcomed in Clive, where he held the rally, by thousands of protesters who gathered outside the event. Some actually even made it inside the venue and heckled him during the speech. So very clearly, the White House is looking to redirect and make the midterms kind of a referendum on the economy, and they're trying to do it fast.
Let's pivot to Switzerland now, and there is a growing row between Switzerland and Italy over the Crans-Montana tragedy. There's been an investigation into that terrible fire. Now, I know that within hours of that happening, you were on a train to Crans-Montana. You were there, you witnessed the chaos, and it would seem that the investigation is suffering from the same lack of clarity.
Yeah, several Swiss papers here, including NZZ, are reporting on that growing pressure from Rome over the investigation. And of course, 40 young people died, and a total 6 Italians, aged very sadly between 15 and 16, were among the victims. So Rome now wants a more active role and is unhappy with how the Valley prosecutor is essentially handling the case. So the Italian government is protesting a decision by a Valley court to release the owner of the bar from pre-trial detention on bail. Meanwhile, in Switzerland, the federal government is trying to send a clear message that politics mustn't interfere with the judiciary, a core Swiss principle. So it's gotten to the point that a few days ago, Italy has even recalled its ambassador to Switzerland, a highly unusual step between these two countries. And I think it raises, of course, a bigger question of how far foreign governments can go when their own citizens are involved in these terrible incidents abroad. And it does look like, going forward, a joint Swiss-Italian investigation is legally possible, but only if prosecutors request it, not the politicians.
Let's go to France now and Les Echos. And this is a business story, really interesting, because it's something that I know our own founder and chairman has been writing about recently. And it's a sort of generational divide within the workforce.
Yeah, I think, and it's something I think you and I, Georgina, have kind of noticed as well. Hours pouring over the weekends over changing news stories, and we're trying to react to them really quickly. But yeah, it's a warning coming not really from politicians, but for companies themselves. In Les Echos, the columnist Dominique Sue asks whether businesses are essentially heading toward a divorce with young people. And, we're seeing all these first quarter numbers coming through. Company results are seeming solid. The economy is holding up despite the political chaos that can sometimes happen. But he argues that there is a real risk among young workers. And he points basically to 3 tensions, which is the first is artificial intelligence. We are seeing more articles now. Sadiq Khan has spoken about it, about how AI is already hitting entry-level white-collar jobs and pushing youth unemployment higher despite being promised to help out so much. Secondly, there is a changed relationship that he says with work, which is younger employees are more transactional. They're perhaps less loyal, quicker to leave if recognition or meaning doesn't come long enough. There's, something I've seen is this act your wage attitude, which is if it's not explicitly pointed out in my job description, I'm just not going to do it. And he also argues that climate is discouraging some graduates who expect companies to stay committed. So I think the message from the leaders that we're seeing, especially in France and European countries, is that profits may be strong, but there are weak signals and they shouldn't be ignored because there is a rupture with the younger generation that could become a very real issue down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. Youngsters really changing the way that people think about work. And it is a problem with those of us who've been in the workforce for much longer, who would never dream of thinking about, for instance, bringing our whole selves to work.
What does that mean, Georgina?
Yeah, who knows? You wouldn't want my whole self, believe me. And you certainly wouldn't want people emoting all over the place. But this is happening because in China, the crying horse is the new toy to have.
I love it. Yeah, a light retail story from China ahead of the Lunar New Year. So a plush toy known as, you said, the crying horse has become an unexpected bestseller. It was originally designed to smile for the Year of the Horse, but a factory mistake stitched the mouth upside down by mistake, giving it this sad, almost embarrassed expression. It looks like it's kind of judging you. I'm not going to lie. So, and the owner of this shop thought like people would be returning it, but instead she saw shoppers sharing photos online, and it's since then gone viral. Many young workers in China are saying the crying horse is kind of perfectly capturing how tired they feel, how much overworked and stressed they might be, especially as China's economy slows. But vendors say they now can't keep the crying horse on the shelves. It's proving, I think, that sometimes a manufacturing mistake can turn into the perfect symbol for the times.
Absolutely, and it seems to me that the crying horse is about to be a huge hit in France, if that Les Echos column is anything to go by. Laura, thank you very much indeed. That's Laura Kramer speaking to us from our Zurich headquarters. And this is The Globalist on Monocle Radio. Now, here's what else we're keeping an eye on today. The World Bank has approved $200 million in new funding to help Lebanon meet basic needs as it recovers from an economic collapse that began in 2019. Most of the population has fallen below the poverty line, and the crisis is ranked as one of the worst globally since the 19th century. France's government has survived 2 no-confidence votes after forcing through the spending section of its 2026 budget without a final vote in the lower house. The budget now moves to the Senate and is expected to trigger further political confrontations as the government relies on constitutional powers to bypass a divided parliament. And the wife of former South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol has begun her trial on charges including bribery and political interference. Kim Gun-hee is accused of profiting from price rigging and accepting bribes and is the first detained presidential spouse to be formally indicted. This is The Globalist. Stay tuned. Now for a look behind the headlines. Here's Monocle's senior foreign correspondent and executive producer, Carlota Rebelo, on Portugal's upcoming ballot.
It's been 40 years since Portugal last had a presidential election runoff. This means that for the vast majority of Portuguese, Sunday the 8th of February will be the first time that they will have the opportunity to cast their ballot in what looks like one of the most consequential votes in the country's 52-year-old democratic history. The 2 candidates are left moderate António José Seguro and far-right André Ventura. Seguro is positioning himself as a unifier, able to bring the nation together at a difficult economic and geopolitical time, while Ventura thrives on chaos, saying he is the face of the anti-establishment, here to disrupt what he calls a corrupt system. In the past week, moderate voices from the right and the left have thrown their support behind Seguro, arguing that this election is not about the old political binaries, but the democratic values that Portugal has championed since the 1974 Carnation Revolution. Opinion polls released by CESOP Católica last week show a lead for Seguro of 70% to 30%. Even if, as expected, Seguro wins, the fact that a figure such as Ventura has made it to the second round should influence whoever gets the keys to the Belém Palace in 11 days' time. The Portuguese are tired, feeling the brunt of an escalating housing crisis and a healthcare system that is bursting at the seams. Retaining young Portuguese talent remains a challenge, and investment in defence continues to trail behind what it should be for a nation whose maritime territory is nearly 20 times the size of its land area. This will be Portugal's 5th election since November 2023, when a corruption scandal brought down António Costa's socialist government. Those allegations have since been dismissed. More than anything, now the nation needs to leave behind a cycle of political instability. Ticking the right box on the 8th of February is key to that.
Carlota Rebelo, thank you very much indeed. And for more, you can sign up to our daily newsletter, The Monocle Minute. Head over to monocle.com/minute. This is The Globalist. It's 9:32 in Maputo, that's 8:32 in Zurich. Well, now to Portugal's former colony, Mozambique. The country's facing its worst floods in a generation, with more than 650,000 people affected and large parts of the south cut off, in scenes that inevitably recall the catastrophic floods of 2000 that killed hundreds and produced the memorable image of a baby borne up a tree. This time, the crisis is regional, with rising waters also hitting Zimbabwe, South Africa, Madagascar and Malawi, and fears growing that dam releases upstream could make the situation even worse. Well, I'm joined now by Brendan von Essen. He's an analyst for Africa Risk Consulting based in Cape Town. Brendan, good to have you back on the show. How does this flooding compare with the situation back in 2000?
Hi, Georgina, and thank you for having me. Thankfully, while this flooding is, of course, incredibly serious, it is not nearly as bad as it was in 2000, definitely from a human cost and death toll point of view. For instance, in 2000, between 700 and 800 people died in those floods, where in the most recent flooding, only about 15 fatalities have been confirmed, while then over Mozambique's entire wet season, which started around November, they've recorded about 115 to 120 deaths. So just in terms of the cost of human life, it has been nowhere near as severe as the 2000 floods.
What has changed since 2000 and now then in terms of infrastructure and disaster preparedness?
Well, I think Mozambique does remain an underdeveloped and poor country. It is nowhere near the same levels of poverty and underdevelopment it had 26 years ago. And in that intervening time, Mozambique's infrastructure has got better. It has improved some of its storm adaptations. But most importantly, I would say there's been better region integration, better cooperation, and especially in recent years, Mozambique has implemented various early warning systems with support of its international partners, particularly around its river basins and flood-prone areas, which has made it easier to notify, evacuate people, and just be better prepared for these, not floods this bad, but the frequent annual floods.
And so how bad is the regional picture then across Malawi, Madagascar, South Africa, and my own home, Zimbabwe, too?
It's pretty severe. I mean, this has been quite heavy flooding. Obviously, South Africa's iconic Kruger National Park has had to shut down and suffered severe infrastructure damage. And across the region, you've seen thousands, hundreds of thousands of people being displaced, large-scale infrastructure damage, bridges washed away, roads being damaged. And that will have some real long-term effects on both people's lives, social interactions, and the economy going forward.
And the humanitarian situation on the ground? I mean, people have lost homes, farmland, transport links.
It's bad. I mean, as you mentioned, over 600,000 people have been impacted in Mozambique alone. Over 100,000 have been displaced. And unfortunately, in a period of time where there isn't the same kind of resources going towards humanitarian assistance, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, after the US has pulled back, and other countries, even in Europe, have other commitments. However, a lot of aid has come in and help is being delivered, but it isn't sufficient. And so this will have a serious long-term effects on development. Food security will most certainly worsen in the area, not just as a result of people being displaced, but also due to hundreds of thousands of acres of cropland being destroyed. And so the impacts of these floods, while being very severe now, the impacts will be felt for the rest of the year, maybe even into next year. I suppose for Mozambique, there's a benefit that the flooding is happening in the south and not in the north, where there already is a massive displacement crisis related to that security situation.
Yes, and I mean, so would you regard this, or is it understood better as a climate story rather than a one-off natural disaster?
I would definitely say so. Flooding in Mozambique is cyclical and happens every year, but it is getting worse. And I feel the fact that this flooding happened outside of, I suppose one would say, a category level tropical storm. And I think this is something the region, particularly low-lying areas such as Mozambique, need to prepare for worsening storms and this becoming much more of a frequent event and less of a once-in-a-generation incident.
And finally, Brendan, politically, what sort of pressure does a crisis like this put on a government in one of the world's poorest regions, which, as you say, is also facing this conflict in the north?
I think in the short term, as in a couple of weeks, we won't put too much political pressure other than the government needs to act. But I think we'll really start seeing impacts in the weeks and months to come. Mozambique already has deep anti-government resentment following last elections. There's a sense of government disconnect and corruption. So as the repatriation or the relocation efforts struggle, great resentment, I think, will build to the government, particularly if any stories of mismanagement and corruption emerge. And then this will also be compounded by the fact that the mass displacement will place social and community tensions in host communities, especially if displaced people try and seek shelter across national borders.
And Brendan, just before we go, I really wanted to mention the fact that I said I recalled the pictures of the baby born up the tree. I don't know if you remember those that flashed all over the world. And we've just heard that, in fact, at 25 years old, that baby, a girl, has died of a long illness. It's very poignant, that coming to an end as this crisis happens once more.
Yes, it does feel, I don't know what's symbolic, but definitely very intense and incredibly sad. As I'd grown up in South Africa, that was an incredibly iconic and, I suppose, in some ways, awe-inspiring and terrifying story when it happened. I remember it obviously made huge news here. And it feels, I suppose, extra sad, not just for the loss of that family, but there is the sense that Mozambique is still trapped in this cycle of crises that seem to have bookended this young woman's life.
Brendan, thank you very much indeed. That's Brendan von Essen in Cape Town. And this is The Globalist on Monocle Radio. Now, I am joined down the line from Lars Vavanga, who's Monocle's Oslo correspondent. Lars, hello to you.
Good morning, Georgina.
Now, tell us about Oscar and BAFTA nominations for the Norwegian film Sentimental Value.
Yes, well, it's quite nice in a world of doom and gloom on the news front to have a happy story to start with, isn't it? So the Norwegian film Sentimental Value just picked up 9 Oscar nominations last week. Yesterday, it picked up another 8 BAFTA nominations, and it's really propelled Norwegian cinema to the forefront of many people's minds. Now, this is seen in Norway as quite fantastic, because Norwegian cinema has been, on the up for quite some time. But if you go back a bit further to the 80s and 90s, it wasn't really, didn't get a look in, at least not internationally. The quality of Norwegian films has really risen in recent years, and this film has now really put Norwegian cinema front and center in many people's minds, at least people who are maybe not cinephiles, but interested in going to see good films.
Absolutely. Well, Norway firmly on the map, but also let's have a look at the map of Norway, because of course you share 200 kilometres of border with Russia, and Moscow's now asked Oslo to end regular anti-war demonstrations. Some of these are led by a princess.
Yes, so the Norwegian border with Russia is only 200 kilometers, but it's still a very important one, because just across the border from Norway is where the main chunk of Russia's northern fleet is situated. And this is where they've got pretty much all of the nuclear capacity submarines. It's where they would have to pass to get into the Atlantic. So Norway is very much the whole of NATO's eyes and ears. And now, in this border area, in the town of Kirkenes, which is just about 8-10 kilometers from the border, people have been regularly demonstrating outside the Russian general consulate, waving Ukrainian flags, singing the Ukrainian national anthem. Now, the Russians up there have had enough, and they've been complaining to the Norwegian Foreign Ministry that this has to end, because they shouldn't be bothered in this way. Well, the Norwegian Foreign Ministry has said, well, you're going to have to put up with it as long as you are illegally invading another nation state. Now, where does this princess come into this, you might ask? She's not actually physically been at the demonstrations, but she's just finished a 3-day journey up in the Arctic north of Norway. She just returned back to the palace yesterday, and she spent the last day talking to Norwegian border guards, looking over into the Russian hinterlands, and a lot of people in Norway say this is sending a very strong signal to Moscow that the north of Norway is very much on a lot of people's minds, and a very important part of Norway and of NATO, of course.
Finally, let's have a quick look at the oil fund, which is in hot water.
Well, the oil fund has been, there's been a lot of focus on the oil fund lately in the past 3-4 months. You might remember towards the end of last year, I was talking to you about its ethical investments and how much it should be pulling out of investing in Israel, and especially in Israeli companies involved in the Gaza war. Now, a new government-appointed body just published their new recommendations earlier this week on Monday, that maybe it needs to look at other risk factors as well. It was set up when we had a rules-based world order, and this looks more and more likely to be reversed if you look at how the administration in the US, for instance, and Moscow are behaving. So they have suggested that maybe it needs to divest in some of the big US tech firms. It's got about 15% of all its investments are in Apple, Amazon, and Alphabet. Now, that might be too risky, this advisory panel says, and maybe we need to look at divesting and investing more broadly. Now, it doesn't say directly that this is something to do with Trump and that he's so unpredictable that we have to look at our US investments more closely. But there might be some thoughts behind that underlines that particular risk as well.
Lars, thank you very much indeed. That's Lars Bavanga, our Oslo correspondent. This is The Globalist on Monocle Radio.
IQ, EQ, and AI. 3 components key to the craft of innovation at UBS. Because to stay ahead in a rapidly evolving age, you need a partner with decades of experience, endless passion for the work, and a finger on the pulse of leading technologies, bridging human expertise with artificial intelligence, all to elevate you. UBS, banking is our craft.
Now, South Korean superstar boy band BTS haven't even released their comeback album yet, but they're already causing diplomatic ripples. Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum has written to South Korea's President Lee Jae-myung asking for more BTS concerts after demand in Mexico hugely outstrips supply. BTS are returning after a 3-year recording break for South Korea's mandatory military service. They have a new album and a global tour kicking off in April. Well, I'm joined now by Bernie Cho, who's president of the Seoul-based K-pop agency DFSB Collective. He joins me from Los Angeles. Bernie, lovely to have you back on the programme. How has Mexico emerged as one of the world's biggest K-pop markets?
Well, you know, it's really fascinating that when we think about K-pop and we obviously look at the K, we just assume the K is Korea. But truth be told, most K-pop fans are actually not from Korea. When we look at the latest streaming statistics from places like Spotify, South Korea is only responsible for roughly 15% of the total streams of K-pop worldwide. Specific to Mexico, Mexico is now the 5th largest market in the world for K-pop. And over the past 5 years, there's been a 500% growth in streaming volume just for K-pop, just in Mexico alone.
That's extraordinary. I mean, what does it tell us about how global pop culture has shifted away from Western dominance?
Well, you know, I think as the music industry has gone more global, you know, as much as we talk about the surge in Latin music, K-pop, and now even Afrobeats have become not so much niche, but more mainstream music genres. When we look at various platforms, be it audio or be it video, international pop music, specifically Western music and English language music, is having to make room on stage for multilingual, multicultural, multinational music. And so now when we talk about, for instance, K-pop, truth be told, it's kind of now the new pop music because so many K-pop songs from not just Korea, but from different parts of the world now are starting to not only chart, but more importantly, top the charts.
When we look at BTS specifically, that they're acting as cultural diplomats, really, whether they want to or not. I wonder at what point a pop group becomes a national asset.
I think one of the reasons why K-pop culture has become such an important part of the branding and the imaging of South Korea is in many ways K-pop culture, but specifically K-pop is usually cited as the most lingering important image of South Korea right now. And so in many ways, South K-pop has very much become a soft power tool and more importantly, an instrument. K-pop culture, all variations of it, whether it be video games, music, TV, film, and now fashion and food and cosmetics, it's the second largest consumer goods export out of Korea. So it's not only an important political component, but also an economic engine as well. And, you know, right now, as of late, the new president has really been leaning into and leaning on K-pop culture to spread his diplomacy. Just a few months ago at the Asian Pacific Summit. He had a hit parade of K-pop stars mingling with politicians, whether it be G-Dragon as an ambassador for the event, to BTS's RM actually giving a keynote speech in front of all of these global dignitaries, to just not too long ago, I think in fact a few weeks ago, the president of Korea had a drum duet with the Prime Minister of Japan. And on that playlist of two songs was Golden from K-pop Demon Hunters and Dynamite from BTS. And so in many ways, music has become a very important part of the sort of charm offensive that the current administration has been spreading globally.
I mean, it is extraordinary when presidents like Sheinbaum of Mexico start lobbying for concerts. Are we in a new kind of politics built on fandom?
You know, I think as much as I would like to assume and think that the president herself might be a BTS Army fangirl, truth be told, I think what's really happening is a lot of politicians, and it's not just the president of Mexico, but in other parts of Latin America, or for that matter, even in America, realize that the youth vote, particularly those who happen to not just like but love BTS, is a very important voting block. And so, you know, for instance, time and time again, if and when a presidential candidate, for instance, this happened a few years ago in Argentina, if one of these political candidates either make a positive, but more importantly, a disparaging remark about BTS, these fans rally and actually become not only a political force, but depending on what side you are, maybe even a political nuisance. It happened not too long ago when Donald Trump was trying to have a rally, and K-pop fans rallied and basically made the venue, although it was touted as sold out, empty because the K-pop fans snapped up the tickets and were a no-show. And I think with the president of Mexico, although she put this request in, it was really in response to sort of the anger from Mexican youth who want to see this concert. Not only were they not able to buy tickets, you know, that's just unfortunately part of fan culture, but what it really has done is it's spotlighted the fact that when big concerts like BTS come to Mexico, there is price gouging, not only at the retail, but more importantly, at the secondary market level. Tickets, if you were lucky to get them, were anywhere between $100 to $1,000. But unfortunately, the secondary market, they skyrocketed to $5,000. And so the president, tapping into sort of the anger of a lot of Mexican youth, has really raised awareness and attention that to satisfy the youth vote, you got to go after some of these youth issues. And at the moment, the hot topic button happens to be big live concerts.
Bernie, thank you very much indeed. That's Bernie Cho in Los Angeles. Paris Haute Couture Week is well underway, and one show in particular has had the likes of the notoriously hard-to-please Anna Wintour on her feet. I'm joined now by the editor of Confect, Sophie Grove, to talk about what's got the fashion world giving a standing ovation. Sophie, hello, welcome back. You're just back from Paris, and you were at the Chanel show. Tell me more.
I was, and I also leapt to my feet, Georgina. It was very inspiring. It was such an exercise in kind of dreamy sort of escapism. Just this incredible vista. You stepped into the Grand Palais and there were these kind of pink, candy pink willow trees, and then huge toadstools and mushrooms, you know, all different colours and many sort of candy hues. It felt very Lewis Carroll. And then there's this great soundtrack, a kind of lot of Joan Baez and kind of really folk-inspired, cathartic songs. And there's this incredible collection from Mathieu Blasi, which was sort of very emotional, but also quite subtle. Incredible textures, but not kind of these great big sculptures and spectacles you'd see. I mean, that was really in the set.
I mean, because this was his first couture outing as the new artistic director. Were you sensing a big shift in that? Is the company going a different way under him?
Well, I think it was just very nuanced. And I think, first of all, it was an exercise in sort of displaying the real craft and savoir-faire sort of heft of this incredible maison, because just the the textures, oh my gosh, you know, this beautiful rendering of sort of these amazing ateliers that they have at Le 12 FM in just outside Paris. You know, the kind of plumassier, all of the different embroidery. It was so incredibly showcased in this collection that it honestly took your breath away. And then I think that was very subtly done. There was a lot of discretion, which is interesting for Mathieu Blasi, because obviously people are waiting with bated breath, thinking, like, what's he going to do with couture, like blow us away? And he did blow people away, but in this very discreet, deliberate, emotional way. For instance, the very first look to come out on the catwalk was a Chanel suit, but it was sort of rendered in sheer silk mousseline, just absolutely poetic, referencing, you know, all of the codes of the house, but then very modern, very free. It's all about movement and expression. So it felt like a really incredible contemporary iteration of couture, almost moving the very concept of couture along to something that's to do with female self-expression. You could see the clients in the audience wanted to immediately inhabit the clothes, which isn't always the case with couture.
Tell us about the casting, because as well as the clothes, it's the people that wear them that are important.
Yeah, I mean, the casting was amazing, I have to say. Just such a great mix. And I think that fierce identity of each look was very much echoed in the casting. A real mix of ages, for instance, and ethnicities, but certainly age really struck you. But also just these very individual, sort of pronounced characters. And it was quite interesting, Georgina, because this nature theme played out. The inspiration is called, it's from haiku, which is called Bird on a Mushroom. And the look started sort of metamorphosing into these avian-inspired birds. And so the women took on this incredible plumage, and the looks became more confident. There were sort of cockatoos emerging, raven black looks. Then there were sort of these slightly more curious birds of paradise. And so each look, I mean, it was very subtly in an abstract sort of iteration, but it was very interesting to see it, and then echoed in this very, very strong and bold casting.
How wearable is the collection?
I mean, I think it's infinitely wearable, and it's interesting because couture for many years has been an artistic statement, and I think it definitely still is for the house. I mean, this whole concept and the nature and the metamorphosis and all of the incredible kind of meaning that's built into the collection is very artistic. It feels like it is a kind of very much a spectacle that has a lot of abstract meaning. But the actual clothes were so covetable and incredible. I mean, there were some really amazing gowns, but then there were also just beautiful looks, and you could see they were in the audience, which is quite interesting. The audience was a huge mix. There were journalists and celebrities, and Nicole Kidman was there, and various people. But at the same time, there were some women who were in their 80s who had obviously been Chanel customers for many, many years, and you could see them absolutely delighted by the suits and the beautiful shifts, and the collectors were obviously entranced. Because it's not, you're not going to wear it down to your local market on a Sunday morning, but it definitely had an ease, a very, very seductive ease that just made sense as a garment. Mm-hmm. And I think that was quite unusual, and it didn't necessarily hinder the fact that it was a very artistic collection.
Sophie, thank you very much indeed. That's Confex editor Sophie Grove, who's just returned from Paris. And that's all for today's programme. Thanks to our producers, Hassan Anderson and Angelica Jobson, our researcher, Annalise Maynard, and our studio manager, Steph Chungu. After the headlines, there's more music on the way, and the briefing is live at midday London time. The Globalists will return at the same time tomorrow. I'm Georgina Godwin. Thank you for listening.
With UBS, you have a truly global partner, incorporating new technologies, innovative approaches, and unexpected opportunities, leading you to insights that help answer the questions that matter, delivered with passion, care, and unmatched expertise. Because it's about rising with the dawn each day, knowing that we can do even better. That's what banking is to us. Not just work, but a craft. UBS. Advice is our craft.